A shocking trial in the U.S., the judge's unexpected action made the murderer pay a heavy price. Can you believe it? In court, Dante, one of the three perpetrators in the murder of 18-year-old Jordan Ciari, showed an attitude that made everyone angry. Although he was only 17 years old and considered a minor by law, Dante showed contempt and the victim's relatives spoke in court. Not only did he laugh, he also blatantly made sarcastic comments that made the whole hall explode. On the afternoon of October 4, 2016, the soft yellow sunlight shone on the quiet streets of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Jordan Ciari, an energetic 18-year-old boy, had just finished school at Pioneer High School. Wearing a neat soccer uniform and shiny sneakers, Jordan leisurely walked home, a short but familiar distance. However, that peace did not last long. As soon as he turned into a small alley with few people passing by, Jordan encountered three strange young men. They stood leaning against an old brick wall, their cold, scrutinizing eyes staring at Jordan. All three were from a gang that often gathered in the neighborhood, and today, their eyes stopped on Jordan's expensive sportswear and shoes. The atmosphere quickly became stifling. One of the three stepped forward, a gun peeking out from the sleeve of his thick coat. They did not say much, pointing straight at Jordan's face, signaling him to take off all his clothes. Jordan, though scared, still tried to stay calm. But before he could do anything, a dry explosion rang out. The cold bullet pierced his body, leaving a dark red blood stain on the ground. Jordan collapsed, his eyes gradually blurred but still tried to look up, as if looking for help. But the other three did not hesitate, they quickly stripped off his clothes, shoes, and belongings. Their footsteps faded away, leaving a terrifying silence on the small road. At this time, the sun had set, the deserted road was left with only Jordan's motionless body. A neighbor passing by discovered him lying there, but when people approached, Jordan was no longer breathing. All hope of saving him had vanished. This case immediately shocked the local community. A young, talented man, always loved by his friends, had to leave because of a pair of sportswear and shoes. The cruelty and indifference of the perpetrators left inconsolable pain for Jordan's family and those close to him. The three suspects in the case were quickly tracked down and arrested by the police after only a few days of investigation. Images from security cameras near the scene, along with statements from neighbors, helped the police clearly identify each of them. Of the three perpetrators, two were adults, with tough looks and cold attitudes that made anyone who saw them shudder. But the third, Dante, attracted special attention. At 17, he looked smaller than his accomplices, but his defiant eyes and smirk on his face showed an unacceptable arrogance. As a minor, Dante was given special protection under the law. He did not face the same harsh terms as his two accomplices. Instead, prosecutors offered him a plea bargain, a chance to escape a more severe sentence. Under U.S. law, this deal allows the defendant to plead guilty before trial in exchange for a lighter sentence or probation. Dante seized the opportunity. At the hearing, he stood there, his eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for something more interesting. Without hesitation, he admitted his role in the crime, but his testimony was completely lacking in remorse. "I shot Jordan, and then I took his stuff. That's it," Dante replied calmly when asked about his actions. The attitude was like a slap in the face to the victim's family. Those present at the hearing, including Jordan's mother, could not contain their anger. A mother in pain from the loss of her son faced with the smirking murderer of her son. Emotions exploded in the courtroom, but Dante remained unchanged. He stood there, looking as if the whole thing was a joke. The plea deal had given him hope for a reduced sentence, but his contemptuous attitude had angered everyone present in the courtroom. No one believes that such a person deserves any leniency. The hearing took place in a heavy and tense atmosphere. On the side of the auditorium, Jordan's mother, Karen, stood up with red eyes, her face marked by indescribable pain. She stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling as she held onto the wooden platform as if it were the only support to keep her steady. Her voice choked, each word she uttered felt like a knife stabbing into her heart. She told of the difficult days that mother and son had overcome together, from when Jordan was a child until he grew up and became the pride of the family. Her trembling voice mixed with sobs as she mentioned the image of her only son, who had always been her motivation to live, now only remaining in her memory. Jordan was not only my son, but also my friend, my only support in life. And yet, now, I have nothing left, she said, tears streaming down her face. The entire courtroom fell silent. Some of the audience couldn't help but bow their heads and wipe away their tears. But in the midst of that emotional scene, Dante, the murderer, sat back in his chair, his arms crossed over his chest, his face relaxed. He looked around the courtroom as if he were watching a boring play. And then, when Mrs. Karen spoke of the pain of losing a child that nothing could compensate for, Dante laughed. It was a cold, contemptuous laugh, as if the mother's pain had nothing to do with him. That action was like a slap in the face to the dignity of everyone present. Indignation rose not only from the victim's family but also from the audience, the lawyers, and the judge. No one believed that a man who had just confessed to murder could be so insensitive. The climax of the arrogance came when Judge David Schwartz asked Dante if he had anything to say before the trial ended. Dante raised his head, his arrogant tone resounding throughout the courtroom. "I just want to say that I will return to my family soon." Those words were like a spark that lit a keg of gunpowder. A heavy silence fell for a few seconds before Judge Schwartz, who was known for his patience and impartiality, could no longer hold back. He banged his gavel on the table, stood up, his eyes blazing with anger. "Who do you think you are to say such words here, in front of the victim's family? In my more than 20 years as a judge, I have never met someone as insensitive and arrogant as you." The judge's powerful words were like thunder, causing the atmosphere in the courtroom to stop. Dante, who had been laughing and smug, suddenly lost his confidence. The smile on his face disappeared, replaced by a confused look, not understanding what was waiting for him ahead. Dante stood in the dock, his usually bold face turned confused as he heard Judge Schwartz's cold statement. The courtroom was suddenly quiet, not a whisper could be heard. The light from the large windows shone directly on the judge's chair, highlighting his majestic appearance in his long black robe. Schwartz, with sharp eyes, looked straight at Dante. He did not reveal any emotion, but his resounding voice made everyone in the room feel the weight of justice. "Given the defendant's arrogant and unrepentant attitude, I will not let him off the hook. We will proceed with a jury trial, and if convicted, prepare to spend the rest of your life in prison." His decisive words were like the sound of a gavel, shaking the entire courtroom. Dante, who had been confident that he had settled everything with the plea deal, now stood still. The smirk that was always on his face was gone, replaced by a wavering gaze. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white, trying to hide his panic. But his every little movement was not lost on those present. The trial lasted for days, with testimony, irrefutable evidence, and heated debates between defense attorneys and prosecutors. Every time the jury looked at Dante, he tried to maintain his composure, but deep in his eyes, despair was growing. On the day of the verdict, the atmosphere in the courtroom was so tense that no one dared to breathe loudly. The jury, after hours of deliberation, finally reached their verdict. Dante was sentenced to 50 years in prison, with the condition that he serve a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. When he heard the number, 50 years, his legs almost gave out. He struggled to stand, but cold sweat soaked the back of his shirt. His two accomplices, sitting beside him in an eerie silence, shared the same fate. Sentenced to 45 years, with at least 15 to serve before he could be paroled. One of them bowed his head, his expression blank, while the other closed his eyes as if accepting his fate. When the trial ended, Judge Schwartz stood up and walked away from the podium with a steady gait. He did not look back at Dante, but his statement still echoed in the minds of all who witnessed that day. His sudden action was not just a decision, but a strong message that justice would always be served, not a joke for the wicked to exploit. A worthy ending. This sentence not only brought justice to Jordan's family but also served as a strong warning to those who disregard the law. Judge Schwartz's decision was widely supported by the public, capping off an emotional trial. What do you think? Do you agree with Dante's sentence? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos.